What's up, guys? It's your boy Exodus here. I am glad to be back for another week. Alright, so this week we're going to be talking about horsepower, right? So a lot of people don't really know about this, especially people that aren't car people. So this video is mostly for you guys and for the people that are interested in learning more about cars. Hopefully this will give you a little bit more information in how we determined what horsepower is and what it equivalents to, right? What's equivalent of, 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower, and how someone that created this is Scottish. And long history, I just want to say that we're going to be talking about horsepower and torque also, because horsepower and torque go hand in hand. A lot of dealers, when you go to dealerships, don't really explain to you, how much horsepower is this, how much horsepower is that. Only people that are really car savvy know about, what they need to be looking for, especially if you need a truck for hauling stuff or just an SUV so you can go, rocking or just going off road. You need to know these things, and a lot of people aren't telling you. So I'm here to tell you exactly how horsepower and torque affect your day-to-day, especially in the vehicle you have. All right, let's go. Intro. Back with the fucking intro. All right, so we're gonna be talking about horsepower now, right? So like I said, crazy enough, right? So the term horsepower was coined by a Scottish man named James Watt, right? Who sometimes people have kind of gifted him the props for creating the steam engine. He didn't, but he did improve it by a lot. So I'm going to break it down to you why it's even called horsepower and why he decided to coin that as something for his selling point. So what he did was he reimagined the steam engine, right? Back in 1776. He did improve the performance of it and also the fuel efficiency, which at that time was coal. So he needed a way to sell his new engines and bring sell his new engines capabilities to the market with something that we would understand, right? Because this thing can do, so much PSI and produces just and everyone at that time was kind of like, what does that mean? Because that was the first time, steam engines or any engine at that point where they're like, we don't know what it is. This is new to us. It was something new to everyone. So we were like, well, we have horses, so we can just deal with that. So he literally used horses to compare his engine to. So he figured that the best way to show them how much better it was to horses was to compare it to something that is horse driven, to how much grain it could produce, how much of the other stuff. So he used that horsepower as something to compare to what, legitly, horsepower, the power that you would get from using horses to grain things. So that is one thing. And think about this, right? So horsepower, beautiful thing. Now, horsepower, when I created this, he wanted to show that horsepower means 550 pounds of work being pulled, job being completed. So it would take, let's say, 1 horsepower. So 1 horse could pull 550 pounds. Now imagine that, like a little horse going pulling 550 pounds. That's what he compared it to. So people were like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. But then you gotta think about it, right? So 1 horse, most of our garage openers are not even 1 horsepower. Most of them are half a horsepower, right? And you have some garage openers that are 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower, and you think about it, 1 horsepower is 550. So you're saying a 2 horsepower garage opener could pull so 2 horses could pull 1,100 pounds. You do not need 2 horses to open and close a garage. It's very easy task to do. The thing barely weighs anything. right? So horsepower is the rate of work that can be completed, and torque is the amount of force needed to be applied to sustain that work. So that's how horsepower and torque kind of fall hand in hand. So horsepower is important for buyers to know. It really is. Like, I feel like if you are buying a car, it is something you need to take into account. It's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to, right? So horsepower and torque, if you have high amounts of horsepower and torque, you do accelerate quicker. But then you got to think about it too. Lower horsepower makes you more fuel efficient, right? Than if someone that has higher horsepower. That's why if you go compare a Honda, which probably, I'm going to average one out because I don't have one off the top of my head, has like 180, 190, 197 horsepower. And then you're looking at a Challenger that has 375 if you're looking at the RT version. And you definitely know that V8 is guzzling that gas. Compared to that four-cylinder, only have 197 horsepower, you're saving a lot more fuel. You're going from 35 miles per gallon to, if you're like, and that's on the freaking highway, to maybe 20 per gallon realistically on the highway. Man, it makes a big difference. So yeah, there's like, pros and cons for everything. So you need to really think about, especially in the economy we're in now, having a higher horsepower vehicle is not it, man. You got to think about it. You're going to be paying this much here in gas if you have a 397 horsepower vehicle. And then you'll be paying like almost like less than half of that for a vehicle that has 197 horsepower. And we're going to average that out into like, let's say, gallons. We're going to average that by gallons that needed. I know it depends on some vehicles. Like, I'm just comparison because I know this information, but a Challenger has about a 16-gallon tank. I don't know how much a freaking sedan would have. I would say like probably about the same or a little bit more. But the amount of times you'll have to fill it up will be a lot less than a 397 horsepower vehicle. So when you are thinking about buying your vehicle, depending on what you need it for, and most people are just using it to commute from and to work, you don't need that much horsepower. Now we're going to get into horsepower and torque a little bit more. So wait for that. The torque of vehicles is very important. Not every single vehicle is the same. There are work vehicles for hauling and pulling things. You do want a little bit more horsepower because it does mean you're getting more torque. Unless you work on the car yourself, you're not going to find a vehicle that has a low amount of horsepower with a high amount of torque. Unless you're talking about a diesel engine. Because diesel engines can produce a lot more torque and not have that much horsepower. Well, that's just, again, different engines. So that's why most people prefer diesel engines, because it can be a smaller, not engine, but it can produce less horsepower, but give you a lot of torque. And they're just meant for working, right? But if you're talking about the daily driver, most of the time, you shouldn't really focus about torque. A regular, I'll say F-150 or a Ram 1500 will have enough torque to get the job done. So the most important thing to get out of this is how horsepower is literally how you should measure the fuel efficiency of vehicles. Now, if you want to get into like racing and other stuff, top speeds and stuff like that, then I would worry a little bit more about horsepower, because the higher the horsepower, the higher the top speed is, the faster you can get the vehicle off the line, because the higher horsepower again equals more torque. More torque gives you more, lets you accelerate to pick up that speed quicker. And that's very important, especially if you're going from a stop, if you're like drag racing or whatever you decide to do on your off time, legal or not. You're going to want more torque to get off that line faster. So if it doesn't fall into that, I would recommend just sticking with the lower amount of horsepower. And the lower it is, the better fuel efficiency you will get. Or vehicles that are hybrids, but that's something for a different topic. So I'm gonna cut this one short. This isn't really a big topic. You know, horsepower is just very easy thing to explain, and the history is very like, you know, a fun tidbit though. A 5 horsepower steam engine was about the size of an entire freaking room. And now we have engines that are 50 times more powerful than that, and it fits under your hood. Crazy if you think about it. Something that small can produce 50 times more than the first engine that was rated with horsepower. Insane, huh? But thanks for coming to watch my little TED Talk. Please do like this video, you know, just right here. Like, subscribe, ring that bell notification, just so you can get updates all the time. I'll post maybe the link over here to our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Patreon. Please do check those things out because, like I said, we are starting out, you know, a little bit of support from you guys, either on Facebook, just liking our content, you know, sharing it with your friends. Just getting the word out there would be great. If you do decide, if you want to support us in any way, we do have our Patreon page that kind of like keeps you guys updated and also like helps us, you know, especially with funding, to be able to get better equipment and just better the experience for you guys. And then, you know, with the more funding, we could focus a little bit more our funds with getting us better gear, and then maybe even later on in the future give you guys better content so we can just focus mostly on this. So I just want to thank you guys again for watching our videos. Thank you for your guys' support, and I hope to see you guys next week. All right, bye.